Hi, everybody. I'm Kirk Montgomery. Welcome to Kirk's Critters Plus here on WLNS Plus, our new streaming app. I am so excited today about who my guest is. Um, I've known this lady about 6.5 years now. I want you to please give a warm welcome to Ginny Mikita. And you are an animal chaplain. We're going to talk about that because there's a lot to unpack with that. Um, but I want to know, take me back to the beginning. Your love of animals started very young.
It did. It did.
Talk about that.
As far back as I can remember, I had an affinity for animals and an almost uncanny ability to find strays as I was growing up that I would bring home. The challenge with that is my dad was an Air Force fighter pilot, so
Okay,
we
right.
moved every 2 years. And so it was a little bit of a challenge. We had a lot of dogs named Brandy.
Okay.
Many of them we couldn't take with us because we moved overseas and other things. But as far back as I can remember writing as a child. In fact, I just found this recently. We had to make our own books. I must have been 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
And I titled my book "A Home for the Holidays," and my illustrations were all actually. The dog in my book looked like your Joey. I will send you a picture. And so each cage had a different animal. There was a bunny, a rabbit, and a dog, a Cocker Spaniel.
Oh my gosh.
We are a Cocker Spaniel family.
Yeah.
And so, but it was a home for the holidays. And at the end, there was even a pullout. The holiday was the 4th of July.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm from a military family,
Right.
so that was a big deal.
Yep.
And you pulled this little thing, and these fireworks.
And you made this book?
Yes,
Wow.
But I found it the other day, and I thought, isn't that interesting? Even then, I was looking at rescue as something that called to me, and that was not part of our family, my family's career, my mother or father's careers, but it came naturally.
And so, how did that later develop to what you do today?
Well, initially, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, but at the time, we had adopted a cat, and I had allergies with that cat, and so for a long time, I believed that being a veterinarian was just out of the question because I had allergies.
Right.
And so, long story short, I ended up going to law school to do animal protection. That was the sole reason I went.
Okay.
And at that time, this was back in the late 80s, there was no animal law, if you will.
Okay.
Now, many law schools have actual devoted
Really?
programs and clinics they're teaching animal law. I've since taught it at a law school, and it just so much has changed in the years since I applied.
Well, you started in regular law, right? Or no?
Well, I went to law school to do animal protection, and then figured I'd just do it as a side gig.
Okay.
That somehow I would manage to fit that into my practice. So all of my interviews, I made sure that the folks I was interviewing with knew that I was really interested in that, and that would be part of my practice.
Okay.
So even back when I was with a firm, my first job actually was I clerked for a federal judge for 2 years, and even managed to get a couple one-liners into opinions that had something to do with animals. And I think he and I both influenced each other. But yeah, so that's how it started. And I did ultimately end up, I was able to spend a year and a half in Washington, D.C. working for animal protection organizations as in-house counsel. So I did eventually do it in that mode for a while before I came back to West Michigan.
And now talk to me about, you're an animal chaplain. Explain to people what that is.
So let me start by saying that after I got into animal law, or started practicing law, it became readily apparent that even if there are good laws that protect animals, the real challenge is transforming hearts.
Right.
that there's discretion, especially in cruelty cases. That's a great example. There's so much discretion along the way. You call, you're concerned about an animal's treatment next door. The animal control officer or the police officer at that point has a lot of discretion whether they do anything.
Okay.
That matter gets brought to a prosecutor. Now the prosecutor has discretion to determine whether charges will be brought. If charges are brought, the judge or the jury has discretion. Usually it's the judge to determine whether or not how it's going to go forward.
Right.
And so because of that and that sensing that need that my real call was to hopefully transform hearts, I went to seminary, went to an interfaith seminary
Okay.
with the hopes of being able to work at it from that angle.
Right.
And so that's how animal chaplaincy came to be part of my resume now.
Yeah.
Because I'm able to use both. I've got a case going on right now in Michigan. It's a legal case. Actually, we've just applied to be heard by an application for leave to be heard by the Michigan Supreme Court
Oh.
in a case involving chimpanzees that are being held in a roadside zoo in the Upper Peninsula.
What?
So I'm local counsel for the Non-Human Rights Project.
Okay.
And we're getting off on a tangent, but
No,
it's a
no.
good story.
Yeah.
So that case was filed in 2023, and one of our expert witnesses was Dr. Jane Goodall.
Oh, my
So she
gosh.
prepared an affidavit that was filed in this case in 2023. We were just heard in October in front of the Court of Appeals, and now we're looking at the Michigan Supreme Court. But I bring this up because one of the things that Dr. Goodall started to explore was the spirituality of animals. And so she would watch chimpanzees, and in her words, they were having spiritual experiences of awe and wonder at these waterfalls. If you have a chance, you should check out the YouTube videos. They're beautiful. So we used in our brief, the Non-Human Rights Project attorneys, both of whom were out of New York and California, and then I'm local counsel here in Michigan, agreed to incorporate that as part of the argument as to why chimpanzees, and I mean, we're starting with chimps, but obviously, in my estimation, all animals,
Right.
all animals' lives are sacred, and they're each imbued with a divine spirit, and I believe capable of experiencing spirituality in their own ways in which we'll never really know.
And so that is that how Animal Blessings started?
That's exactly right. I started a nonprofit to do a couple of things. I still do estate planning for folks who want to plan for their animal
Right,
companions.
Right. These are things you don't really think about.
Right. So that's still happening, as well as some advocacy that has happened on and off throughout the years with regard to many species. In fact, most of them are represented on my stole. I have stories that each of these, there's a story for each. But in addition, with Animal Blessings, that's part of my animal chaplaincy work.
Okay.
And that is to honor that and tend to the quiet sorrow and enduring joy of the human-animal bond. And so that begins with supporting individuals and families through all of life. And Animal Blessings, obviously, in many cases, are situations in which we're just grateful for. Many churches now hold them, secular environment places hold them, and it's an opportunity to express gratitude to our animal companions for what they bring to the world.
Well, because that's kind of how we met when I was on the west side of the state at a different TV station there, and you were a guest on our lifestyle show at the time. Yeah. And I remember approaching you about my pup, Joey, who at that point was nearing the end of his life. He had not been well, and how beneficial and gracious you were to me during that entire process. I get a little emotional still thinking about it. Plus, as I told you off camera, we're coming up on the 6th anniversary of his passing.
Yes.
But I want to segue into the monthly support group that you,
Yeah.
because talk about, I don't think, unless you have been there, unless you have gone through it, I don't think people understand the depth of grieving the loss of a pet.
Yeah.
They really don't.
No, no. In fact, I've been facilitating a monthly support group for almost 15
Wow.
years in West Michigan, and it's an I hope to create a sacred space for folks to gather, tell stories about their beloveds, hopefully find some meaning and healing in that space around the loss because it is so huge. And one of the reasons I have a grief support group that is just for animal companion loss is what you've just touched on. That's so often that grief, which I often call a disenfranchised grief. It's a kind of grief where no one brings you a casserole.
Right.
And so it's a grief that is often either not understood or invalidated,
Correct.
even in well-meaning comments.
Like
You
I
know?
said, unless you've been through it, you don't get
Yeah.
it. And you have well-intentioned friends who their intentions are,
That's
are in the
right.
right spot, but they'll say, the worst thing you can ever say to anybody, you'll get another one.
Yeah. When are you going to get another dog?
That is the
Yeah.
worst possible thing you can say to someone who's grieving the loss of their pet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many of those statements that are they're as you said, they mean well, but they are not helpful.
And everyone processes their grief.
Yeah.
There's no timeline. Everyone does it in their own way. And you've told me before that people who come to these groups, the grief may be fresh as in last week, or it could be 8 months ago.
Yes.
Right?
Right. In fact, I have a couple people right now that have been coming for over a year. I've got folks I had someone who came after 3 years who realized they'd never really properly grieved. I think so many folks the tendency, and I think this is what we do as humans, it's so challenging to dive deep into that space. Right. And so it's like, I'm just going to go back to work and not think about it. But grief is really patient.
Yeah.
It will wait very patiently and surface oftentimes with another loss. I'll see a loss of someone who has lost perhaps a parent, and this was the parent's animal that they're caring for, and now it's sort of it all kind of gets bunched up and complicated.
Yeah.
But it really it is such a my goal. The only rule in the group is that I ask people to share, but they cannot. I ask them to please don't preface your share with, "I know this sounds crazy."
Right.
Because my hope for all that come is that they will have an opportunity to mourn without apology.
Absolutely. And without judgment.
Without judgment.
Because again, unless you've been through it,
Right.
people just don't understand the depth of it. Now, luckily, when my Joey did pass, my boss at the time was an animal lover, and she got it.
Yeah.
So I was able to take several days off work because I was just numb with grief.
Yeah.
And there were such little triggers, finding, like, what do I do with the dog bowl now? What do I do with the extra dog food?
Yes.
I would stare at the doggy door that I had installed, right? And months and months later, honestly, I ended up leaving that place because there were so many memories that I moved to a different location because I had so many memories of him. And like you said, grief is patient. I mean, we're coming up on the anniversary, and I still get teary-eyed, and I still think I can hear his chain, on his little ID on his collar, and the pitter-patter on the floor. And granted, I've been able to love again with my cat, Denver, but that's a whole nother story of how that came to be. So I know Joey sent me my cat, and I know that sounds crazy to people who are listening, but read my book.
No. See, you used it. crazy word, but it
Oh, right.
isn't.
Oh,
It
it isn't.
isn't.
I know.
It isn't.
It,
I
we
absolutely
need to
believe that.
we need to normalize
That's right.
grief.
That's right. It's so interesting. You talked about hearing the chain.
Mm-hmm.
The New York Times this weekend has an entire section on death, a special section. And one of the articles, one of the pieces is about those messages from the afterlife.
Wow.
So they included it. Of course, they're talking about human experiences,
right.
but it's one after another.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, Kirk, when that door gets opened in our group, when someone mentions this, most, if not all, have had the experience, but are really reluctant to share with anyone. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe it, and I don't think I'll ever understand it. But the reality is, as I tell folks, I'm like, you know what? Does it bring you comfort? Is there some bit of comfort in that? And if so, hold on to that.
Right. What
Hold on.
What advice do you have to give to well-intentioned friends and family of someone who is grieving? What would you say to them about showing some grace to the person who's going through it?
Yeah. One of the most important things is a reminder to folks that you're bringing up someone's beloved who has died is not a reminder to them. They are already thinking about it.
Right.
I think a lot of people are afraid to say anything because they think they'll somehow trigger something and now you'll remember. Well, the reality is most people are walking around with that grief.
Right.
Just not articulating that to everyone that they encounter. I think it's really important to use, like Joey's name. Tell me a story.
Right.
Tell me about something really funny that Joey used to do. Those things, but in terms of all the cliches, tuck those away.
Yeah.
God didn't need another angel. God didn't have a plan.
Right.
The
Right.
idea of, but you gave Joey such a good life. I mean, all of these things are just, they're not helpful.
Right.
Better to, if you really are struggling, just, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And leave it
Period.
at that. Yeah. And just be a good listener.
That's right.
Yeah. Be a good listener.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So these are you've been doing it 15 years. They're monthly. They're in the Grand Rapids area.
They are.
Which is not that terribly far from Lansing,
No.
So I would encourage anyone to at least check out the website, check out your Facebook page, and it is well worth the hour drive if that's what it is.
I've had people come down. I've got a guy who right now who's got a farm sanctuary up in Mecosta County,
Okay.
and he made the drive down, and I know he wouldn't mind if I shared that he cried through the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
It was they've had so many losses, but it was a long drive for him, and I've had many people come from out of county, and I'm happy to have folks come and yes.
And what's the website?
Animalblessings.love.
Animalblessings.love.
I was grateful .com was not available. That's how that came up.
.love. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you still are you still actively involved in the law firm, right? Or no?
I am.
You are,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Still practicing law, and that's how I got involved in the non-human rights project case, and still do estate planning for folks that are looking for ways to make sure that their animals are cared for in life as well as death.
Right.
I mean, sometimes something happens and you're hospitalized unexpectedly, and you want to be the one that makes the decisions about where your animal how your animal's companion is cared for.
And if someone is interested in, so you'll do, because I remember you did this with my Joey, an animal blessing where you bless them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Explain to people how that works, and is it open to anyone who would like to do it? Or
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I do these kind of, for lack of a better word, corporate animal
Okay.
blessings where there are many animals and they're coming for that particular purpose.
Okay.
A lot of those show up around St. Francis Day in October,
Okay.
the patron saint of animals. But I also will make house calls.
Yes, you do.
And so that's how I got to meet Joey
Yeah.
and be in his presence, and happy to do that. And I've done that not only with folks who are contemplating next steps, which are really, really challenging, but also have been on site when a veterinarian is there to euthanize
Right.
an animal.
Well, and that's the other thing. You had introduced me to is it Heaven at Home?
Heaven at Home.
Heaven at Home
Yeah.
Hospice.
Yeah.
And people may not be aware that that's even an option for them,
Yes.
where the hospice person will come to your home, beforehand,
Yes.
just to kind of observe, right, and evaluate their condition.
Right. Right.
And I'll never forget, because I worked in Grand Rapids, but I lived in Muskegon, and I clearly remember the worst possible timing. It was a Sunday. We had a blizzard going
Yes,
on,
I remember.
and I called because I just knew in my heart that it was probably time,
Yeah.
because I didn't want him to suffer any longer. And of course, you also, maybe it's human nature, but I also second guessed myself for months. Did I do it too early? Could I have waited and held on to him another 2 weeks or another 2 months? Then the rational side of myself says, well, why would you want him to suffer like that?
Oh yeah.
But it is. I questioned the timing for months afterwards.
Kirk, that is. I don't mean to interrupt, but I
No.
want to tell you that comes up at every meeting, and folks either believe it was too soon or too late.
Oh gosh.
I can count on one hand over these years the number of people who said, "Yep, got it right,
Oh,
did
wow.
it at exactly the right time." It is such human nature to question and feel guilt is just it's a big feel
Right.
that we deal with. But you've named the things, thinking about what's in Joey's best
Right.
interest,
Right.
and it is such a challenging decision. But yeah, so they were able to come out. Heaven at
She came
Home.
out in the
Yeah.
blizzard on a Sunday, raging snowstorm, and the most gracious, loving. I mean, it was difficult. Don't get me wrong, but I would have I'm so happy that I was able to hold him in my home
Yes.
and let him pass that way, than take him to some sterile, clinic somewhere. So I highly recommend people at least explore that route for themselves, because it's so much more loving, I think, than the alternative.
Yeah, it is. It can be really, really peaceful.
So, oh my gosh, look at the time. We didn't even take a break.
Oh.
I want to close now with, if someone is going through that right now, what would you say to them?
Going through the decision making, or just in that space of all of this?
All of this, yeah.
I think, number one, be gentle with yourself. Be gentle and graceful with yourself in the decision making, and involve others. Journal, because sometimes it's helpful to remember, because you'll quickly forget what your thought process was at the time. But really involve your veterinarian. That's really someone you trust, because they're able to step back from something where you're in an emotionally charged place,
Right.
and your frontal lobe is just off the charts.
Right.
And so it's better to have a professional that's guiding you. The veterinarians in the hospice and palliative care community, their goal is to try to make sure that your animal companion has the best quality of life. And speaking of which, there is a quality of life questionnaire you can get online. That's another thing that is
Okay.
very helpful because you can start keeping tabs. Maybe do it once a week and see how is your beloved scoring. Sometimes just seeing it on paper is helpful because
Right.
it is a gradual. I can remember with my black lab rescue, Katie, I I walked her 2 miles every day,
Mm.
and I one day realized that getting that second mile in was getting harder for her coming back.
Right.
It was such a gradual decline, and I didn't see it because I was so in it.
You were so close to it. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's helpful to have others around you that you can process with, journal, use the quality of life scale, contact
Okay.
your veterinarian, and start to have conversations about what does this look like and what are we looking at and how can I make sure my beloved is comfortable.
Right.
On a weekend, like in your situation,
Yeah.
those are the hardest, you
Yeah.
know. So,
I can't thank you. Look at the time.
oh,
I cannot thank you enough for
oh,
this. It's been a blessing to see you again and
it's
to hear
always
your
so
words.
lovely.
Oh,
Oh my gosh, Kirk, thanks for having
of
me. And
course. Of course.
yeah, yeah.
All right. We're going to wrap things up. Again, the website again,
Animalblessings.love.
animalblessings.love. I encourage you to check that out and the resources and everything she offers, as well as the monthly group meeting and check into hospice if you're in that kind of situation. We are out of time. This is my fourth Kirk's Critters Plus. Yay. And I want to thank all of you for your patience as we chart this uncharted territory with all this new equipment and this new streaming service. But I want to thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time. Peace.